Hello, fifth graders. Today is a very exciting day for me, a day in which I would say, starting with Monday's assignment on, your life will never be the same. So I am excited to be introducing you guys today to Watership Down. This is my favorite book to teach in fifth grade, and it's one of my favorite books ever. I actually hadn't read it until I was getting ready to teach it, and I fell in love. I fell in love with the book. I fell in love with the characters. It was one of those books where saying goodbye to the characters at the end was heartbreaking because I fell so in love with them. So I will say, every year students think, it's a book about bunnies. How good can it be? And then every year there's sort of this students are surprised by how good this book about bunnies, and really we should say rabbits, can be. So keep an open mind. I always say, if you decide something's gonna stink, guess what? It probably is. So choose to be open and choose to go along for the ride, because it really is just incredible. An incredible book. So for today's video, we're going to do a lot of background information about the text, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the homework assignment or homework assignments moving forward, and then we'll have a little bit of an introduction for tonight's assignment. So to get us started, this book, Watership Down, was written by Richard Adams. He wrote the book, he kind of created the book, I guess I should say, the stories of it, by telling his children stories, and he meant for them to excite them and to thrill them, and then eventually that turned into the book that he wrote, which, if you know about Tolkien and his production of how he ended up, with Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, these were stories told that then turned into the books that he wrote. When he wrote the book, he took it to get published, and he actually was rejected 7 times before he found a publisher who was interested in accepting his book. So J.K. Rowling's similar story, right? She tried again and again to get Harry Potter published and struggled until she finally did, and now it's a huge success. So Richard Adams, not quite so many rejections, but still a lot of rejections before his book got published. So a great example of fortitude and believing in yourself. So there's a lot of characters in this book, and a lot of them are based on buddies of his from, I think, World War II, maybe, don't quote me on that, but buddies of his from the war, so they're kind of based on real people that he knew. So the book is called Watership Down, and it really has nothing to do with water. Well, there is some water in it, but not ships. Well, actually, there's some ships in it too. But what this is, Watership Down, is in reference to, first of all, what a down is. So a down is going to be kind of an open area, rolling hills, lots of grass, lots of vegetation. So when we think about a down, this is an example of a down. Actually, this is a good one. Throughout the book, they're going to talk about an iron tree, and that's an example of an iron tree, one of those pylon lines. Okay. Another example of a down. And another example of a down. That one looks a lot like the cover of the book. Another example. I think that's the last one. So, Watership Down is actually a real place in England. You could go and visit there if you wanted to. So it's a real place. So when we talk about Watership Down, what we're talking about is the location or the setting of the book. It's set in this location called Watership Down. There's a lot of mention of plants and different kinds of plants and flowers that are in the area. I will provide vocabulary lists for you, again, as sort of a reference point. But if I'm not defining something for you, it's pretty likely it's going to be some kind of a plant or some kind of a tree or some kind of a flower. A lot of the characters, most of the rabbits, are named for various plants or flowers in the area. So to just give you an idea, Hazel is one of our characters. There's a hazel tree. Speedwell is one of our characters. Speedwell flowers. Hawkbit and holly are both types of flower and plant. cowslip and boxwood. So there's a lot more than just these 6, but it gives you an idea. So when we see the names of characters, they're going to be typically named after a tree or a plant or a flower of some kind. Also, most of the characters in the book are male. Almost exclusively they're male. So even though you might see this name Hazel or Holly and think those tend to be female names, all of the characters in this book are male. It's actually kind of important, not throughout, but through most of the book, it's going to be an important part of it, that most of our main characters are male characters. Okay. In addition, they refer a lot to a copse. They also would call it, well, we'll take a look at copse. So this is what they are talking about when they talk about a copse. Essentially, it's like kind of a grouping of trees all together. Think of it like a mini forest. So this is what they mean when they say copse. They also talk about a beach hanger. A beach hanger, so this has nothing to do with airplane hangers. And beach, in this case, we're talking about beech trees, so spelled differently than like the sea beach. So when we talk about a beach hanger, it's going to look like this. Okay, so again, a grouping of trees in an area, kind of like a small wooded area. Okay. Also important in the book, there's going to be a lot of, or not a lot of, but some mention of snares. Snares are traps that are used typically to catch small animals. And so the kinds of snares in our book that we'll see is going to be something like this, where there's this wire, right? And after the animal goes through, you can see that this knot will just tighten and then get trapped around the animal. So this kind of tells you the way that the knot would tighten as an animal pulls on it. And then this is also a good picture. There's going to be reference to stake and wire. And so it would look like this. The stake would be put way underground, okay? And then the wire would be formed into a loop a lot like this loop. But then again, after the animal goes through, the wire would tighten around them, and then the stake could be taken out. So something to consider. So as I mentioned, this book is a book about rabbits. Don't let that fool you. Don't let that lull you into a feeling of like, oh, cute bunnies, because that is not what this story is like. So Richard Adams, again, our author of our book, did a ton of research in order to really capture animals accurately. He wanted them to be described as accurately as possible. So he did a lot of research from a book by R.M. Lockley called The Private Life of the Rabbit. He even kind of consulted with R.M. Lockley a little bit to get accurate information. And he refers to that a little bit throughout the book, but his goal really was to capture rabbits as they are. In other words, aside from some of the talking maybe that they do, and there are some characters that do some slightly different things, but really the rabbits are doing what rabbits are doing. They're not like having a tea party where they all get out their teacups and sip out of their teacups, and they're not driving in cars, right? These are rabbits that are supposed to be acting like rabbits really act. So some things about rabbits. Rabbits are going to be most active at dawn or dusk, and we're going to see that in the book. They tend to sleep or stay underground during the heat of the day, but then they're up dawn and dusk, feeding and moving around, which you'll actually notice as spring progresses. You'll see that you're going to notice rabbits way more now that you're reading this book. But again, you're going to see them a lot of times first thing in the morning if you come out of wherever you live, right, and you open the door and can see rabbits kind of scattering. They're going to talk about this thing called the white blindness throughout the text, and it's myxomatosis is the sort of formal name of it. The rabbit's called the white blindness. But this is a virus that spreads from rabbit to rabbit, and it causes them to grow tumors, it causes them to go blind, and then ultimately it dies from them. And it's a highly contagious rabbit virus, so it's actually interesting in this time that we're in right now, right, that the rabbits, again, once one rabbit gets it, it kind of spreads, and then all the rabbits will end up dying. Rabbits, in terms of eating, there's going to be a little bit of reference in the book about chewing pellets. And so rabbits eat pellets. So if you think about how cows, for instance, digest their food through multiple stomachs, rabbits have kind of two digestive processes as well. So they eat and then they'll digest. And so one thing that they'll produce is called a pellet, and it's a super nutrient dense little pellet, something that they can get a ton of nutrients. So they'll eat their food once, and then they digest out a pellet, which they eat, and then they get even more nutrition from it the second time. They do then also digest in a final way for waste, which we would think of like, poop that they do process. So when we talk about the animals eating pellets, they're not eating their waste, okay? They're eating something that their bodies have been made to produce for further nutrient richness. And then rabbits, they'll talk about warrens, and in the book there's a little bit of reference of warren as the group of rabbits, like we are a warren together, right? But it's also the physical location. And so when we talk about a rabbit warren, they're going to live in underground typically, right? So what we see when we're looking at a rabbit warren, we're going to see holes, right? But for a really intricate warren, you're going to see there are these runs, okay? So these kind of hallway type things are called runs, and then these burrows as well. So this will be where we'll see rabbits kind of together in a burrow, and then sometimes, under a tree. But again, this is what we're talking about when we talk about a rabbit warren. So some things about rabbits at this point. So let's talk about the book itself. The rabbits speak in their own language periodically called Lapin, which is the French word for rabbit. And so if you are curious, in the back of your book, there is a Lapin glossary, okay? So as we go through the book, a lot of these terms are going to be developed within the book itself as we're going through, but if you forget at any point, if you want to refer back, it's a great reference. Anytime a Lapin word is used, you can look there to remind yourself what that word means. And again, by the end of this, some of these you're absolutely going to just know to be true. So they have this term RAH, R-A-H. That's what they put at the end of names for someone that they consider their leader. So you'll see periodically an animal will be called something RAH, right? Hazel RAH, or Fiver RAH, or Threr RAH. So we'll see that in the book. Rue is something they also put at the end of names, and it's a diminutive term is what we would call it. So it's kind of like, oh, cute, right? So you'd be like saying, oh, like if you said Flowroo, you'd say, oh, that's a cute animal, or like it's an affectionate term for them. They talk about Tassilflay, which is when the rabbits go above ground in order to eat. They talk about being Tharn, which is when you're kind of a deer in headlights, if you've ever heard that term. The rabbits call it Tharn, so when they're scared, they'll freeze and go Tharn. Hraka is the waste that they produce, so they'll talk about a hraka. So again, these terms will be introduced as we go. Allele is another good one, actually. Allele is referencing to any enemy of rabbits, so men or foxes or weasels or all those things, right, are called allele. So as we go through the book, a lot of these terms will be introduced, and you'll get more and more comfortable with them, but it's good to know going in that there will be this second language in there. Mythology. The book is also full of a rabbit mythology. So they tell stories, and it's kind of how they communicate about what's important to them, and they share this whole mythology with one another. So they have gods. They have gods that they are in belief in, and so the main one is going to be Frith, and he's the sun god. Frith is their main sort of superior god, and it's again in reference to the sun. And then there's this mythological character named Elarera, and he could be compared, some people compare him to like, oh, he's kind of like Odysseus, but he's their hero. So they tell these stories about the adventures of Elarera, and then through that they communicate to each other what they think is an important quality for a rabbit to have. So you'll see again throughout the book that they'll tell stories to share about Elarera, and they'll talk about some of the rabbit gods beyond just Frith. So excerpts. Each chapter of the book begins with an excerpt. Okay, so you'll see at the very beginning, right? And it's quoting some other famous play, song, poem, novel, even nonfiction text. And so he'll quote it. And again, it'll relate to whatever the chapter is going to be about. It might not be clear to you at the beginning how it's going to relate, but if you looked back at the excerpt at the end of every chapter, you should be able to connect, this is why it relates. It's also kind of fun because we'll see there are going to be excerpts from stories that we have read this year, or at least that we've seen referenced. So there'll be some connection to things we already know in those excerpts. In addition, maps. There are maps in the book. So the very kind of towards the front, right after the table of contents, I think, yeah, there is a map, and this really is going to track where the rabbits are going throughout the story. So you could follow along and see where they start, where they go, and think about their distance. And then there's also another map in the middle, or I guess more towards the end of the book, that's going to detail another portion of it. So again, these maps are reference as you're looking through. Here's another map later in the book. So something to be referring to. And again, remembering our glossary. So there are a lot of characters in this book. A lot. Okay. So I've uploaded this document for your reference. Again, if you have a printer and want to print it, great. I would not write this all down, but it might be something that if you're feeling confused about references to particular characters, it might help you to keep track, especially at the beginning maybe would be good to keep track of it. You'll also note that a couple of the characters have a slash, and so this is sort of an English name and also a Lapin name. So we see that Fiver is not, he's called Fiver, but he's also called Hreru. The Chief Rabbit is called Threra. Bigwig is probably a good one to know because there will be a lot of parts of the book where he's referred to by his Lapin name. So he's Bigwig or Thlaeli. And then Pipkin and Clowru, the same name. So those are really the main ones that have multiple names. But again, if you hear, just remember that they have an English name, some of them, and a Lapin name. So you'll have to know both of them. So again, I'm going to upload this. You can print it if you want, or just have it as a reference for yourself, but it can be helpful to know or keep track, okay? So as we're going through the book, in terms of literary devices, again, there's a lot of foreshadowing. I'm going to work to try and walk you through it, and as we're getting through the book, looping you back through to see the connections. I'm reading this book for the, 20-something time, and there's things, again, that I'm noticing, like, I didn't connect that this is a connection to something that's later in the book. So a ton of kind of weaving and connecting and looping back and foreshadowing that maybe you didn't know was foreshadowed, but then once you read, you should be able to look back and make that connection. Mood. Thinking about mood, especially towards the end of the book, part 4, there's going to, but this will happen throughout the book, actually, like the weather kind of links to what is happening in the story. So what does it mean if it's overcast? What if it's sunny? What if it's raining? What if it's storming? And so kind of be paying attention to how the mood connects, the mood that the author is trying to capture connects to what's happening in terms of the weather, okay? And then finally, we will talk about themes. We are going to be keeping a themes chart together. So we're gonna probably do most of it together via video. We'll walk through and find some of this evidence and keep track of it in a chart together. So there is a themes chart. We have a couple of themes we're going to be talking about. One of them is what makes a place a home. Okay. And so this will really be a huge part of the book. The rabbits are ultimately trying to find a home. The importance of trickery. We're going to learn that rabbits talk a lot about how important tricks are. So that'll be another theme. The necessity of adapting to survive. So think of your science class, right? When we're talking about adapting, we're talking about changing how you live, changing how your body is in order to survive circumstances. So we're going to see some examples of adaptation in order to survive. What makes a good leader? We're going to be introduced to a lot of different types of leaders, and so be considering what makes somebody a good leader and maybe what makes somebody not a good leader. And then this last one is the purpose of government. And when we talk about government in this case, I'm not actually talking about like elections and politicians and presidents. Really, we're going to see a lot of individual warrens, and each warren is set up for some purpose, some goal. And so we're going to be trying to consider what are the warrens set up for, and then what is a part of a good government? What would a good government do? So I'm going to say a couple of things about this. I'm going to upload it. Again, if you have a printer, great, print it. If you do not have a printer, do not stress at all. I would just open the uploaded document and just copy these bolded parts down and on any piece of paper that you have. If you have a piece of computer paper, great. If you have a piece of loose leaf, great. Honestly, you could do it in your language arts notebook. That's just fine with me. But you're going to make a themes chart, okay, that lists these bolded parts. You're going to have 5 columns, and when you're done, you will have obviously this first row, but then I want you to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, okay? So that's part of what I want you to do for homework tonight is to get your themes chart printed or set up on a piece of paper and then keeping it in a safe place, because we're going to come back to it and again work through it together. We're really going to work on it, but give yourself some space to make your themes chart. Okay. So again, I'm not joking when I say that I'm so incredibly excited. I love this book so much. I'm so excited to share it with you. So as we transition, when you come back on Monday, I have now recorded YouTube videos of the chapters that we're going to be reading. So when you open up your assignments in Google Classroom, there will be links to videos that you're going to watch. Depending on how long a chapter is, you may have more or less, but again, I'm hoping to get to be a similar length per day as much as possible. So kind of the thing about it, right? Remember that a couple of things. I'm not going to require you to listen to the videos. You can read the book, but I will say there's going to be comments that I'm making as I'm filming the videos that you will not hear if you're not watching the video. So I would encourage you to read while having the YouTube video playing. But if for whatever reason on a particular day you don't have access to technology, at the least just read those chapters and then do the homework. So what I'm going to have you do, it's the same thing I say in class, right? Your eyes have to be on the words for you to be improving as a reader. So even when you're playing the YouTube video, I want you to remember that those eyes need to be on the text. So reading along in the text while I'm reading, you're reading and following along. And then if I stop, you can stop and listen. Beginning and end of the chapters, a lot of the times I make comments as well. But your eyes have to be on the words if you're going to improve as a reader. Obviously, I'm not going to be there to make you do it, but this is a great opportunity to hold yourself accountable so that you can improve as much as you can as a reader in this time. So you'll expect most days, you're going to come to the assignment, there's going to be links to YouTube videos that you can listen to while reading along in the text, and then I'll have some homework questions that you'll be completing at the end of it. And periodically we'll stop and we'll work on the theme chart together, again in the form of a video. I'll have different reflection questions as we're passing along the way, but I'm so excited to be starting with you guys. I love this book so much, and I think it's a great way for us to be staying connected to one another even though we're far away. So for homework tonight, you're going to make that themes chart, and you're going to answer a question that I've posted below this video. Let me know if you have questions. And I will help you out as much as I can. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.